and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So today I actually have a pen that I know a number of people have done video reviews on already, but it was a pen that I have recently added to my collection, so I thought I would do a review of this. And this is the Opus 88 Koloro. Now, I don't know, sometimes I want to call it Koloro, sometimes it's Koloro. I think it's Koloro, at least that's how a lot of people pronounce it. So it comes in this just a very standard sort of like wooden, or sort of cardboard actually, not wooden, box. Now I got this in a broad nib, so this is the Demonstrator version. Now it is an eyedropper pen, so you do have an eyedropper here, and you just slide that out. And the reason why, I'll show you, this is a glass eyedropper, and I'll show you the reason why, because it is an eyedropper pen. So this is the pen, and the reason why I got this pen was because of the almost the clear and antique ice effect. I've liked the look of some of the Franklin Christoph models for some time, but those antique ice effects tend to be very limited. They come up for sale and then they're gone very quickly. Now, the same is actually happening with these Opus 88s. I've seen them go on sale in Fonteplumo, and then and likewise that's in the Netherlands, in the US with gold spot pens, and then literally within a few days they're gone, and then it takes about a month to get more stock. They go back online and then they're sold out again. So these are actually becoming quite popular. So this is an eyedropper pen, so it's not a converter, it's not a piston. But it is a lovely pen. So let me just take that out of the way and I'll show you. So in terms of the pen itself, it's a clear demonstrator. You can see how crystal clear this cap is. You have a slightly it's not a smooth clip, it's not a rough clip either, but it's almost like a matte-like finish to that clip. And then you have obviously a see-through cap there. It says Opus 88 on the what would be the cap band, and the pen doesn't really taper down at all. And then you have you see the threads here for the shuttle valve, and then you have again this very crystal-like clear finish to the pen. So for me, this is actually quite a nice looking pen, and I wanted to get this just because I like demonstrator pens. It's fairly affordable. It's around about €100, just under €100. It's about £80, £85 I think. Probably about $120 maybe 130 or 40. Not too sure in terms of the conversion rate at the moment, but it is. It looks a very nice pen. Now, the build quality on this, I would say, is not as good. Now, I will show you here. Now, you cannot hear those threads unscrew. And the reason why is I've actually taken silicone grease to these threads. When I first got the pen, it would go squeak, 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 squeak every time I tried to unscrew the pen or screw it back up. And the same with these threads here. Now, again, they are now super smooth, but I had to take a lot of silicone grease to those threads. Now, that really should be something that is done out of the factory. I think having squeaky threads, plastic on plastic, is never like. I think plastic on plastic threads are good, but I don't like it when they're squeaky. So really this should be something that Opus 88 should have fixed at the factory. It's fixable by yourself. Just get some thick silicone grease. Don't use the liquid version of silicone grease that you get, say, with TWSBI pens. Just get some, like a pot of thick silicone grease from Goulet pens, or in the UK you can get it from the writing desk. And just smother those threads with silicone grease, and then just screw and unscrew numerous times, and those squeakiness should go. Now, it is an eyedropper, so you will want to silicone grease the threads in the eyedropper part of the body of the pen itself. Now, in terms of the nib, it's a number 6 size nib on this version. I think the other the Piccolos, I think they're called, have a smaller nib. Now, I went for a broad nib. Now, in terms of how you fill this pen, I'll show you here. I'm sure you've seen this probably on other videos, but you unscrew the section and try not to drop the section or the body. And then you have basically how you would fill the pen. And this is where the eyedropper comes in, because basically, if I get the eyedropper out, what you would do is you would fill this up with ink, and then you would eyedropper that into here. Now, the problem is you actually have that piston rod there. Well, it's not a piston rod, but it's a shuttle valve. So you can actually unscrew this and then pull that back. Now, I did lubricate that rod here because that was very stiff as well. So you could do that, and you could then easily fill it up more here. The problem you then have is that you have to push this rod back, which is going to displace ink. So you really don't want to do that. So your best bet really is just to screw this up, and then what you would do is, the best way is just to use an ink syringe and just pour the ink in there. Just be very careful that it doesn't splatter out, and you fill it up, and then literally you screw the section back on. And you have an O-ring there as well. So you screw that back on, and then hopefully, if you've done the job right, it should all be good. And so in terms of the pen, like, I really do like the pen, and you can probably see here how it's actually quite warm here today. So it's actually the cap's starting to steam up a little bit there, but you can probably see around the threads there is some it looks damp, and that is the silicone grease. So I silicone grease those threads just to make sure that it makes the pen screw up and unscrew without squeaking. There's nothing worse than something that squeaks. So I think let's do some size checks and some comparisons. So, in terms of the length of the pen, capped, we're looking at 150 millimeters. The cap itself is around 66 millimeters, and then the body of the pen is around, say, about 138 millimeters. So, I'd class this as an oversized pen. It is quite a large pen. I guess sort of in terms of size there, it's quite large. Now, one thing that some people don't like is uncapping a pen if you have long threads. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, just over 4 turns. So this is a long thread that you have here. Now, in terms of the length of the pen, it's quite long. You cannot post this pen. It will not post. It's not been designed to post. But that in itself is the pen. Now, in terms of weight, let's have a look. Now, this is going to be uninked. We have just over 25.5 grams. The cap is just over 10 grams, and then the body, we're looking at just over 16 grams. Now, the body is probably going to take around about 3 milliliters of ink, or 3 grams. So I would add another 3 to that. But in terms of the pen, I think the pen looks rather nice. It is an eyedropper, so you have to be a little bit careful in terms of the pen leaking, but it does have an O-ring. You can silicone grease the threads, so I think from that perspective, it's not too much of a problem. But you just have to obviously be a little bit careful. If you've got a really expensive leather case, you may not want to put it in that, just in case it does leak. I've not heard of any issues with the pen leaking per se, but it's just something I'm always a little bit more wary about with is eyedropper pens. So I think let's just do a pen comparison. So from left to right, we have the TWSBI Mini AL, we have a Pelikan M600 Turquoise White, we have a Pelikan M800 Royal Gold Radon, we have a Conway Stewart Series 100, we have the Opus 88 Koloro Demonstrator, we have an Edison Collier, we have a TWSBI Diamond 580 AL, we have a Classic Pens LM1, a Classic Pens LB5, and a Visconti Homo Sapiens London Fog. So you can actually see that this is actually quite a large pen, especially in comparison with a TWSBI Diamond 580 AL. So let's ink this pen up. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in a Diamine Matador into this pen. So let's see how much ink the pen will take. So I think let's move that out of the way first so I don't spill the ink. Remove the section. Now obviously you're going to have to be careful when you're putting ink in here that when you try to screw the nib back on, that you screw it back on vertical and not horizontal, because you're going to tip all the ink out. So let's try and not do that on camera. So this syringe here is a 3 milliliter syringe. So I'm going to take 3 milliliters of ink, and we will see how much this will fill. Now I said that I thought this probably would take around 3 milliliters, and it's not far off that. It pretty much is 3 milliliters of ink, or just under. So let's try and see if I can screw this on without displacing the ink, because that's the last thing that I want to do. I don't want to get ink around those threads either. So that is now very secure. So you can now see there that ink is sloshing around. So let's see if I try to put it on the correct way. I'm going to just put the cap back on this ink bottle because I don't want to have ink everywhere. And just move this out of the way a little bit. So if I bring this back, you should be able to see this ink. If I try to zoom in a little bit, you'll probably see an air bubble there, and it's just moving around. So you can see there, it is actually a very full pen. So that is 3 milliliters of ink. So that is more than your standard sample of ink that you would get in a sample vial. Normally you would get around about 2 milliliters. So that is a very thirsty pen in terms of how much ink it's going to take. Now I think let's do a writing sample. But first, I think what we need to do is we need to prime this feed, because to start with, this is not actually going to write. So what we want to do is we want to unscrew this cap here. Just be very careful. That basically that is going to let ink. So at the moment you'll probably see here there is no ink in that ink window. So I'm going to try and agitate it a little bit so we can get some ink flowing. Right, now we actually have it. So you can see here we have it ink. So I'm going to now screw this back up again. So there was ink actually in that ink window. It was just not getting through to the nib and to the feed. So you can see there we're getting a fair amount of ink coming out. So this is a broad nib. So now I think let's try and do a writing sample, shall we? So this is the Opus 88 Koloro, and it's the Demonstrator. Now, this is a very juicy, wet, broad nib. You can see how wet this is. Now, in terms of ink, you can see the ink there. The ink is Diamine Matador. Now, this pen actually has a slight amount of feedback, pencil-like feedback. It's maybe a little bit more than I would prefer. So I might actually take this to some micro mesh and just smooth the nib out a little bit. It's not scratchy. It's not heavy on the feedback scale. On a feedback scale of 1 to 10, where if a nib was glossy smooth at 10, I would say this is probably an 8. So it's not quite as smooth as I would like it, but that's not a problem. Like, at the end of the day, you can improve a nib easily with some micro mesh. So in terms of the line variation, it's a broad nib. Now, if I try to push the nib, it's a steel nib, so it's a hard nib. But you can get a little bit of line variation out of it. Now, in terms of line variation here, you're not going to see a huge amount in the figure of 8s. So it is a broad nib. You can get this in, I think, an extra fine and medium as well. Now, in terms of wetness, let's have a look. So this is, I would say, quite a fire hose of a nib. It's very, very wet. Now, in terms of the feedback, I don't know if you can hear that, but it feels, the feedback is almost like having a graphite pencil on paper. Now, a lot of people like feedback. I'm not, like, it's good feedback. It's not bad feedback, but I prefer to not have feedback as much as possible. So I will probably take a little bit of micro mesh to this and just smooth out that nib a little bit. But in terms of the nib itself, you can see here, like, it's a broad nib. It has some tipping on it, so I just have to be a little bit careful to try and smooth that out. I don't want to remove all of that tipping, but I shouldn't really need to do that on, say, 12,000 grit. But it's just something that sometimes you do have to sort of, if you want to improve a nib, if it's not 100% perfect for you. So this pen, I think, is a really good pen. I don't know as of yet in terms of how the eyedropper will work out, whether or not it's going to leak or not. I'll have to see over time. But this is really just the unboxing and review of the Opus 88 Demonstrator. Now, I may come back and revisit this later and discuss whether or not it does leak. I'll see sort of nearer the time. But for now, I'm going to start writing with it. I'll write a few letters and just see how well it fares. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.